many people get it mixed up and think, well, are you saying slavery started in 1774?
No.
No, it's not what I'm saying. But right here in Carpenter's Hall in 1774 is where the pen was used to write you out of history as far as taking your nationality from you.
That's right.
Because you cannot be considered a human, a person, without a nationality.
That's right. That's right.
So many people think that this country decided to become a country because they was fed up with taxation, with no representation, and the Boston Tea Party, they were finally fed up. But when you do the research yourself, you will find there was a landmark case in 1772 in Britain. This case was it was called the Somerset case. Somerset was a slave. His master was named Stuart. And he took that slave back to Great Britain. And the slave Somerset used that chance he had and escaped his master. So he was found, rounded up, and the master decided to ship him off to Jamaica to be resold. But during the time that Somerset was in Great Britain, he had sympathizers to plead with his cause. So, using law, there was a writ of habeas corpus that said, stop. You can't just take him and ship him somewhere else and sell him. It's like, why? He's a slave. Great Britain says, yes, he's a slave. They consider slaves a servant that had limited rights. Over here in the colonies, they didn't want slaves to have any rights as a citizen. So in order to do that, they looked at this case to see, well, how is Great Britain going to rule? Because these 13 colonies was under Great Britain. So whatever happens in Great Britain can come right across the water because these are colonists of Britain. So this case went on, presided by Lord Mansfield, and he determined that you cannot take him and resell him. In fact, because he's on British soil, they considered there was a saying that if you breathe free air, you can't be enslaved. But that goes back longer than that case, but it was still used to sum up that case. And the point being was he was set free. And the landmark case was like, wait a minute, if that gets over here and we get our lawyers to try cases like that here, we could lose our greatest asset as far as building this country. And not even looking at building this country, because again, these are 13 colonies. So that was the breaking point, not a Boston Tea Party. They said, we have to do something that will make them not be considered servants, but to make them be considered property. Chattel property. They weren't considered chattel property in what they call the motherland in Great Britain. That's how that ruling was able to award his freedom. So here, First Continental Congress, 1774, that's when they took Negro, black, colored, and yes, even African. People want to say, well, African isn't a slave term because that's a legitimate continent. But when you call someone an African, you are in effect stripping their nationality, because there's many nations in Africa.
That's right.
So if you see a case like the Dred Scott decision, when they say descendants of Africans, that's just the same as a slave term. And even our people like to say, because We don't want to separate ourselves from our brothers and sisters. But we cannot identify with being an African because there's many nations in Africa. And to be a human, to be a citizen in any country on the face of this earth, you have to have a nationality. Right. Not name a continent with a bunch of nationalities.
That's right.
You know, I see a lot of times, you see like the Kente culture, and they'll say, oh, that's African wear. But how would you feel if somebody took a traditional garb of Canada and said, this is the garb of North America? Americans would be outraged. That's not our garb. So you can't classify people by a continent. It's the nation that they belong to.
That's right, Moore.
So that breaking point was the point that made them decide we have to break away from Britain. We have to form our own country. And that's why 1774, those terms were considered marks.
Right.
And a lot of our people get this mixed up because in 1779, they were actual names, not just marks. Marks is the beginning. Everything is done in steps. So 1774, the marks were put upon us. 1779, they were actual names, law. But it started here, First Continental Congress.
Right.
And if you wonder, well, how can they have this secret meeting without the mother country knowing? Well, they didn't go advertise, we are having the First Continental Congress. They did it under the context of calling it an Oddfellows Convention because this was done in secret. But the purpose was to actually write our nation out of history. No more Moors. Now you're Negroes. Now you're blacks. Now you're colors. Now you're Africans. And there were others. Just because those were named, you had coons. You had all kind of names. But these names were ones that actually became law to strip you of your nationality, to strip you of your identity, to strip you of your culture, to strip you of your religion. All that was done in one fell swoop by taking your nationality away. So you can't have someone say, why do I need a nationality? Without a nationality, how does religion get passed down from generation to generation? How does your culture get passed down from generation to generation without nationality? Right? So it's very, very important. And anybody that thinks it's not is usually for two reasons. One, they have one already and take it for granted. And the other reason is because they never had one, can never remember having one, so they don't know the difference of why to have one and why not.
Wow.
But if they only knew, this is the answer to all the atrocities that are happening to our people today.
That's right.
People want to say Black Lives Matter.
No.
I'm sorry.
No, it
Black
doesn't.
lives don't matter. Because a man cannot be a color.
Cannot be a color.
So, I mean, and then we get Moors that start studying and find out that at one time, you know, white was considered a citizen. They'll even call you white, and they'll put, well, I'm white. Prophet Noble Drew told us that you can't be a color. So you can't be white either. That is a slave term as well. Because if the slave master is going to make up a term for you and define what that term is, he had to make up one for himself to define all the good and wonderful things. You hear?
Wow. That's right, Moore.
You could tell a little white lie. That sounds like, oh, that's not bad. But you could be the black sheep of the family. You can be black males. You could be black balls. It's like black has all the negativity attached to it. And white has all positive things attached to it. But let it go.
That's right.
That's right.
People cannot be colors. So when you hear people say oh, I'm being hated for the color of my skin. No, you're not. You're being hated because you identify with slave terms.
That's right.
And slaves have no rights.
No
That
rights.
was by design.
By design.
So in 1865, when slavery ended, guess what? Negro, black, colored, African, all of those terms were supposed to end as well.
Right.
And then, lastly, before I wrap it up, I didn't want to be too long, is the fact that we have so many people that read a book, they go online, they find out the history of the Moors, and then they stand up and say, I'm a Moor. That's not enough.
Islam.
Prophet Noble Drew Ali said, you have to join the Moorish Science Temple of America. And you have to proclaim your nationality with us. You can't do it alongside the temple, next to the temple, in conjunction with the temple. You have to be in the temple.
That's right.
There was a process that took your nationality away, and there's a process in which you get it back. With that, I say peace.
Praise Allah. Thank you, Lord.
Islam.
On September the 5th, 1774, the Moors were a divided and defeated nation here in North America. On that date, 12 European colonies met here in this building, known as Carpenter's Hall. It was a Masonic convention. The meeting or convention was originally called the Oddfellows Convention. The popular name of this convention, according to European history books, became known as the First Continental Congress. It must be known that 12 colonies that met here were the actual European nations. In 1774, there was no United States of America. There were 13 separate colonies, each separately chartered and governed. Now, how do you get European nations from 13 colonies? Each colony was composed of European nations under British rule. The state in which we're currently in, Pennsylvania, was composed of European nations such as the Dutch, the Germans, the Swedes, etc. The state of New York was initially called New Netherlands. That colony was renamed New York after the Duke of York, the future King James II of England. These European nations or colonies convened here in 1774. The First Continental Congress met here between the dates of September 5th and October the 26th, 1774, with all representatives of the colonies attending except for Georgia. The representatives included Samuel Adams and John Adams of Massachusetts, George Washington, Patrick Henry of Virginia, famous for saying, "Give me liberty or give me death." At the meeting of the First Continental Congress, Peyton Randolph was elected president, was actually served as chairman. One of the reasons why the colonies met was to protest the intolerable acts. They attempted to define America's rights, place limits on parliamentary power, and also agree on legitimizing the inhumane institution of slavery. The two main documents which came out of the meeting of the First Continental Congress was the Declaration and Resolves of the First Continental Congress, which was passed today, October the 14th, 1774. And also the Articles of Association, which was passed October 20th, 1774. At this very meeting, the issue of the justification of the enslavement of Moorish inhabitants of this land was discussed and debated. The 12 colonies agreed to strip the Moors of their nationality and birthrights. This was an act of European psychology. The European colonists gave the Moorish population the slave marks of Negro, Black, Colored, Ethiopia, etc. And the European colonists defined these slave marks as something inferior to the name white. The European colonies defined white as a color of purity and defined black as representing everything evil. White and black was also used as legal statuses. White meant that you were a citizen or a person, and black meant you were not a citizen, or rather 3/5 of a person. When the Moorish population accepted the inferior slave marks of Negro, Black, and Colored, the Moorish inhabitants cut themselves off from the illustrious history of their forefathers, who were the founders of the first civilization of the old world. It must be made known Black is an adjective, a descriptive word, and not a noun. A noun is a person, place, or thing. Therefore, a person cannot be black. Black is defined as gloomy, pessimistic, such as a black future, sullen or hostile, such as black words, harmful, evil, or wicked, such as a black heart, indicating censure or disgrace, such as a black mark on a person's record, marked by disaster or misfortune, such as black areas of drought. And also, interestingly enough, a definition of black is African American. And it also means to lose consciousness or memory temporarily. The prophet told us black, according to science, means death. Whatever the case may be, by 1838, the term was wedged into the language as a synonym for Negro. And Negro is just Spanish for black. Thus, Jim Crow laws meant Negro laws. Black codes were passed by certain southern states after the Civil War with the intention of limiting the freedoms of so-called black people. The South developed new laws to create the old slave codes, laws that pretended to so-called protect our people, but in fact restricted their activities. These new black codes were identical to slave codes. In most cases, the word slave was replaced by the word black or Negro. The book Illusion of the Races explains, so degrading among Hispanic people, not accepting Spain itself, were the words Negro, that their uses became limited to slaves because they implicitly signified slavery or social violence. Thus, the free black person was called Moreno and the slave Negro. The book goes on to state, in colonial countries, the expression he is a Negro is equivalent to saying he is a slave. By 1819, a South Carolina judge stated plainly, the word Negro has a fixed meaning. That fixed meaning outlined the legal powers and limits of its possessor. Those defined as Negroes, free or not, had few or no rights at all. The book entitled The Name Negro, Its Origin and Evil Use states, the important thing about a name is the impression which it makes in the minds of others, and the reaction which it invokes through the operation of the laws of association of ideas. The first use of Negro to describe a human can be traced back to 1441, when Portuguese kidnappers operated below the Senegal River, used the term Negro to designate their captives. Slaves falling under the primary designations of black and Negro were references to persons legally transformed into property. The official utilization and legal terminology played a significant role in the oppression of the Moors of America. Official nomenclature illustrated a person's legal and social status in America. This country's legislators would master the careful manipulation of laws and legal jargon. This was a necessary tool and skill for legitimizing the blatant violation of this country's catalytic document, the Declaration of Independence. The use of the terms Negro, black, colored, etc. would be employed with legal precision. 4 so-called black people of South Carolina and their wives actually had to clarify their legal status in the years of 1789, 1790, after they purchased their freedom from slavery. They knew, being identified as Negroes, blacks, and colored folks, they would be subject to the Negro Act and the Black Code, which would actually slave laws.
Yo, this is perfect.
Identifying themselves as poor, subject to a Christian alliance, by clarifying their legal status as poor, they were automatically placed under jurisdiction of the office.
What the hell is that?
This treaty is known as the Peace and Friendship Treaty. Under this treaty, it is illegal for war
You cheated.
treaties along with the Constitution are the supreme law of the land. This group of so-called black people was also known as sundry freeborn. In short, the treaty grants the United States of America citizens enforced condition to be protected from the jurisdiction of wars. recognized Moors and U.S. territories were to be under the protection and jurisdiction of the Constitution. The sundry free Moors obviously were aware of diplomatic law. Their case is just an example of how you can be free physically and still rob yourself from the precious rights of citizenship by identifying yourself as slave marks of Negro, Black, and colored. The Prophet Noble Charlie taught us just being born here doesn't make you a citizen. Moors' forefathers did not form the slave marks of Negro, Black, and colored. These inferior names or identities mark the Moors as an inferior class of beings who had to be subjected to slavery. These marks of slave names will forever disqualify and rob Moors from being free people in the true sense of meaning, and which free people use in the Articles of Association, Articles of Confederation, the Declaration of Independence, the Northwest Ordinance of 1787, and the present-day Constitution. The strategy of the plan or conspiracy of the Europeans was used as follows. If the Moors were ever emancipated or set free in the future, the Moors would remain subjugated and dominated by the Europeans that had the sole authority in the classifying system by way of race, with race incorrectly being distinguished as colors such as black race and white race. The Moors would unknowingly forfeit their rights to true citizenship. The slave classifying system was designed just for that purpose. Through this method, the Moors would not have any rights under laws governing free national citizens. The Moors, known illegally as black people, would rob themselves of the precious rights of citizenship by accepting and identifying with the slave marks of Negro, Black, and colored, which did not pertain to any nation of people. Now, one may wonder why this information on the act of the First Continental Congress stripping the Moors of the identity is not readily known. The records of the meetings of the First Continental Congress are known as the journals of the Continental Congress. And what you're looking at is a blown up copy of the cover of the journals of the First Continental Congress. And they are the records of the daily proceedings of the Congress as kept by the office of its secretary, Charles Thompson. The journals were printed contemporaneously in different editions and in several subsequent reprint editions. However, none of these editions included the secret journals. These were confidential sections of the records which were not published until 1821. This complete edition was published by the Library of Congress between 1904 and 1937. Thus, they were published during the time of the Prophet Noble Drew Ali. But today, this is what you'll see with the journals. Show them the other pages.
Wow.
No.
Keep on going, Mo. You'll see large areas. These are the minutes of the meeting of the First Continental Congress, just blatantly redacted. So it's like, what are you trying to hide? One must note that these secret journals that was published during the time of the Prophet Noble Drew Ali. It was reported that George Washington summarized the raging debate on how to perpetuate slavery of the Moors with this statement. If we would agree to take the fezzes and turbans off the Moors' head and remove the sandals from their feet and enforce it with severe punishments, and also to swear a death oath between ourselves to religiously and faithfully not to allow anyone to teach the Moors' children whom they really were or who their forefathers were, and only to allow Moors' children to be taught that they were truly Negroes and black people. That 200 years from today, the Moors people would not know their nationality nor the national name of their forefathers. And they would also not know from which land or ancestors that they are descended from. Islam Moors. So we stand here today and prove that man plans a plan and Allah plans a plan. And Allah is the best of planners. Islam Moors. We stand the manifest destiny of the plan of Almighty God Allah, who sent the holy divine prophet Noble Drew Ali to restore our nationality and birthrights, which was stripped from us in the year of 1774. Islam Moors. So what we're going to do, we're going to stand in front of this building, take a few photos, go inside, you may make a small purchase, and then we're going to come out and journey to Independence Hall. Islam Moors. Let us get in order. Children in the front.
Learn something new every day. Definitely about to use the list.
Picture test.
Right there, I was always checking out.
Y'all see that, family? This is how you represent. This is how you represent, family. This is how you supposed to represent. Look at the family. Let me show you how beautiful they look. Watch this. There she go. Look how beautiful the family look. Check it out. This is a beautiful sight.
I know, but I'm not online.
What is that on?